Hey guys, welcome back to Salmon Industries. Today, we're going to show you how to pull the B3 out of your Festiva. Let's get started. First, I like to remove the hood just to kind of get it out of the way. So your hood's held in with four 10 mil bolts, two on each side, here and here. You're going to want to follow your windshield washer nozzle hose down to here. You'll see there's a little white connector down here. You can just pop the hose off of that connector, take the bolts out, and then pull it out. Make sure you hold the hood down here on the bottom as you're taking off the bolts, so that way your hood does not hit your cowl and scratch up your paint. With that out of the way, we can start removing the stuff that's in the way up top. So stuff like the intake system, the airbox stuff here, a couple of these vacuum lines, a couple of spark plug wires over here. Kind of get that stuff out of the way so that we can see what we're working on. As you can see, we've already pulled the battery out. So just, battery cables off, battery out of the way. Everything else pretty much as it sits. So we're going to start up here. You take your hose clamp off. Then all the 10 mil bolts go into the valve cover. So there's one here, one that holds on the throttle cable, one up front. This one's already gone, but that one will need pulled off. This one near the side. Then following your tube down, there's a bracket right here that holds the tube on. This one's also already been off. Somebody's already replaced this engine once in the past, and they did it quite hastily. So a lot of stuff's already missing, but this little bracket bolted here, so you unbolt that. And then your VAF airbox is held in with a 10 mil bolt here on the back. And then, kind of hard to see, but down here you'll see one right there, another one right there, kind of under that light socket. Both of those come out, and then you can just take off this whole tube assembly as one piece. And make sure you pull off these two little vacuum lines. This one goes over to the idle air control valve. This one just goes straight to the valve cover. Don't forget to unplug your VAF cord before you take it off. So this particular car was missing its little clip on its plug. So I'll show you guys how to remove those clips real quick. You just kind of push in on these little metal pieces on the side, just enough until it clears the edge of it here, and then you wiggle off that side. Then go ahead and go off to the other side, push its metal piece off to the side a bit. Again, just kind of clear the plastic, and then the plug should wiggle off. So once your throttle cable is loose, you can just grab it, and you can see down here towards the back side, it fits in. You just kind of push it down extra. It will pop out the front. You can slide it around. We'll take this cable and kind of lay it over there on the side of the hood. This little bracket here. Just push it down out of that bracket. And we'll just let it chill over here. Next, I like to take the radiator out. Taking the radiator out really simple. There's just these two little brackets up top, and it just sits in a couple rubber bushings on the bottom side. So 4 10 mils to pull out. These just pop off. Then you take off your radiator hose, unplug the fan power, and then on the bottom side there is a drain for the radiator. So we'll come down here. So you see this little white plug right there. Unscrew that. You can drain the radiator. So we'll go ahead and drain it and pull it out. Then we're also going down the back to the bottom. We're going to take off the lower radiator hose, and we can pull the whole thing up. These just pop off. While we're up here real quick, this tube goes over to your overflow container, so it just pops off as well. Throw him off to the side. And now with the top all loose and able to be pulled around, makes it a little bit easier to get out of the bottom and access your lower radiator hose. So let's pop down there real quick. So now, going back down to the bottom, you can see this looks like somebody's used an aftermarket radiator hose, but no matter. You have one clip up here coming off the block, and the other side up here coming off the bottom of the radiator. So we'll probably pull the one off the block. It looks like it's be a little easier to access. All right. Now you just pull the radiator straight up after unplugging its power. So there's fan power, a couple little clips built into the shroud here that hold the wiring harness in place. So move those, and it should just pull straight up. Now you see our lower hose here, fan power, and then if you look here on the bottom, you'll see that there's these little rubber donuts. Sometimes they stay in the car, sometimes they stay on the radiator, so make sure you don't lose these. These are what keep it seated on the bottom half of the car. While it's out, you can see right here, next to where it mounts the car, that's where that valve was earlier on the bottom. Go ahead and screw him back in so that we don't lose it. And we're good. Set this aside. Next, we're gonna go ahead and remove the battery tray, so that way we get all the stuff on the trans out of the way. So just move the battery cables out. There should be 3 10mm holding this in. So you got one over here, one's buried in this muck, so we're going to blow all that out of the way. And then going straight down from here, on the underside, there's a 10mm going into the frame, kind of onto the side. That one actually does not need to be pulled all the way out. You just need to loosen it a few turns, and it'll lift up straight from there. And you'll kind of see that more after you get out of the way. Lucky for us, I guess, looks like somebody already tried to remove this bolt. Even on clean cars, it's pretty common for these bolts to be rusted in place. Just leaking battery acid, holding water in there. So we're gonna try to get this one out without breaking it, but we'll see how it goes. You can see, even on this rust-free car from the Carolinas, how gross this bolt got. So we'll definitely be replacing these with new bolts. Yikes. Now, the one on the side. Now if you look right here, as you see, it's just a little slot that slides down. And if I look down here where my socket got stuck, you can see this is the bolt that we were talking about earlier. Oops. Down here, right in the side of the frame. Same thing, it's pretty rusty. I'll go ahead and replace it with a new one. But, so there's your 3 bolts. I'll take it back out again. So your 3 bolts, one back here. This one looks like it's broke. Oh, nope, there we go. So, spot here, top one here, and then one going to the side right here. You can see all the rust that's been held on there, so we'll probably go ahead and wire wheel and paint this while we're in here. All right, now that those are out of the way, we can start looking at some of the wiring and transmission stuff. For me, when I start the wiring, I like to start with this main front harness here. So I'm gonna go ahead, I already unplugged these spark plug wires, just so I get them out of the way. You don't need to unplug them to pull the engine, since the shooter stays with the engine, but for the video, it's just easier if they're not here. So I'll just take those over to the side for now. So right here, on this big bracket, you'll see there's like a big wire holder right here. You can go ahead and just unbend that to release most of this harness. Looking down, it goes to the switch down here for the fan. So we'll unplug that switch. So coming back in here, you can see underneath this wiring harness a little bit, there's a 10 mil. That is a ground point. So we'll pull that 10 mil ground. I just unplugged that fan switch. Sneaking around, you can see this little small cable going down to the bottom. It goes to right here on the head. This is the gauge wire for your temperature gauge on your dash. So we'll just pull him off, get him out of the way. And then your O2 sensor wire normally is clipped onto this little piece of metal right here. This one's been replaced in the past. You can see where they just kind of, oh heavens, they did a terrible job soldering this chunk of wire on there, but that's what the clip is supposed to look like. So that clip normally sits over here. So unclip your O2 sensor. Then Moving on to the back, you have this main plug. Normally this plug kind of sits up here in this bracket, but like I said, somebody's already swapped this engine, so stuff's kind of everywhere. So just unplug that. And then the distributor wire, same thing, just a clip. Okay, take our 10 mil and zip off that round bolt. There you go. That is the entire front wiring harness. Same thing as always, we'll tuck him off to the side. So you can see that's your fan power, front harness, all that stuff now disconnected. So we're good on the front side. Now this, the one that we just unplugged, this goes down to your injector loom and your coolant temp sensor on the back. So this side of the wiring harness stays with the intake, so you don't need to unplug anything else there. Then over here for the distributor, we have our coil wire. So we'll go ahead and take the coil wire off. Same thing as always, just tuck him off to the side. And then like your coil and your capacitor over here, all this stuff stays plugged in since we're not removing it. Then while we're over here, we can start unplugging the stuff off the transmission. We have the neutral sensor. Down here is the reverse sensor, that other green plug down there. And on the starter, this big 12 mil bolt, that's the main power wire for the starter. It's a little spade connector for your solenoid off the key. So just start unplugging and unbolting that stuff. Same for this green guy. Let's see if I can get the camera down here a little closer. But here's the big main chunk of harness. So it's a pretty big harness here. There's also a ground. Looks like somebody put one of the grounds here where the starter bracket should be. That's not really where it goes, but we'll go ahead and pull it off. Then the other main ground, this is like the main transmission ground. Either here, I think on a lot of them it's supposed to be further back, like on one of these bolts down here, but no big deal there. And then there's the other big main plug for the trans, the reverse light plug. And then you'll see this harness actually continues over. And this goes to the alternator, to the oil pressure sensor, and over here to the blue plug on the IAC. And so we'll get to all those as we get these trans ones done. I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the tripod though and start pulling those off. Next. Okay, now going on to the back side. All right, so bear with me for a second. I'm going to try to get some different angles to kind of show you guys where these last 3 or 4 plugs are here. So coming in from the top back side, you can see here is the blue plug. That's for the IAC, and that's got the little paperclip style thing I was telling you guys about over for the VAF. Same deal. We have to kind of spread that apart a little bit. And then coming around to the other side, on the alternator, you've got a big plug on the back. You just kind of pinch that, pull it out. Okay. So you can see the little clip on the back side. And then on the front side, the nut that holds on this main wire. And then it's going to be really hard to see it, so I'll try to get a view of it. But from the back of the block, I zoom in here, you can almost see down here where my fingers are, this little red and yellow wire with this little clip. I know it's not focusing, but that is the oil pressure sender. So that's just on the back of the block. I'll just reach down there real quick and unplug that. Pull it out real quick so you can see a single spade plug, red and yellow wire, not too hard to get to. So go ahead, I'll finish pulling that nut off to get this off, and then I will unclip the blue plug here. I just kind of wiggled this one off. You don't always have to use the clips. Sometimes you can just kind of pull and they'll pop right off. So here's that strand. Put that nut back real quick. Just come back over here. I can grab a big chunk of harness, just pull it through, and there it is. That's that full run of the transmission and rear side wiring harness. So that's all done now. While we're looking at the back side of the engine, we can go ahead and talk about the rest of the hoses. So for hoses, there's one that goes here, the brake booster, big vacuum line. So we'll just pull him off of the intake real quick with a pair of pliers. And then you have two fuel lines. Right here, coming off the bottom of the regulator, is the return line. Up top here, that's the feed line. Now, easy way to remember this when you're putting it back on. So there's the regulator, so it goes kind of down. That goes back to the tank. The top one, just straight into the rail here. This is the one that comes from the tank. So to make sure you're putting the right one back on, the one that goes to the rail up here, if you follow this hose down, that's the one that comes out of your fuel filter. So you put it back on, just remember, fuel filter to the top of the rail. Then we have the heater core hoses. There's one here, kind of going to this crossover pipe, you have to pull off. And then going back to the other side, where the alternator is. Right here, coming off the bottom of the intake, that is the other one. So pull him off, the other heater hose off, vacuum line, and that should be most of the hoses we have to take off. So go ahead and pop those off. Alright, so that's almost everything coolant electrical that's holding the engine itself to the car. There's also an engine ground coming off from the back of the block over to your passenger strut tower, just a little 10mm bolt. So pull him off and get this ground off real quick. There we go. The only thing really left on the engine itself would be your, in this case, this car is AC. So the AC compressor is held on to the block down here. Somebody's already removed most of these bolts when we got it. This one's still kind of stuck halfway in here, but so we're going to remove the bolts that hold the AC compressor to the bracket, and then we will just pick this compressor up and zip tie it to the front of the car just to keep it out of the way when we pull the engine out. That way you don't have to drain any of your AC refrigerant or mess with these hoses at all. You just can unbolt the compressor, scoot it over, get it out of the way. Then you have the engine mount itself still holding the engine in. And then all the transmission stuff holding the trans in. So like the trans, we still have to remove the clutch cable here. And then down from the bottom side, you can see we've got right here is the shift linkage. And right next to that is the shift stabilizer bar. So we'll have to go to the bottom and take those off. Then there's the rear trans mount, the front trans mount, and the axles. On this car, the axle's already pulled out, but I will show you guys how to remove the knuckles. That way you can get to the axles to pull them out. And at some point, I'll make another video showing you tips and tricks for pulling out stuck axles, because on the Festiva, aftermarket axles get really, really stuck. So I guess next, we'll take off the clutch cable, go underneath, and start pulling all the stuff from the bottom. To pull the transmission cable off, easy way to do it, just come back here to the side, and you'll see this little bracket is held in with these two nuts, 12mm. So we'll go ahead and pull these two nuts off, take that bracket off, and the cable will be loose. You can come up, take it out of this forked spot, and same thing as always, we'll kind of dangle it off to the side. So we'll just pull that bracket off, come up front, slip that right out the side, and there you go. We'll set him off to the side here, where he can check. Next, we'll go ahead and show you guys how to pull the knuckles off. Okay, so next I'm going to show you guys how to pull the knuckle out of the way, so that way you can get to the axle. I know our axle is currently missing, but this is how you do it to get your axle out in the first place. So you're going to want to take off the tie rod end and the 2 bolts holding the strut on, and then you can leave it attached down here on the bottom of the ball joint, and then you can grab this whole thing and pull it, rotate it around that bottom ball joint to get it off the axle. And the big axle nut here, that'll be a 27, 29, or a 30 millimeter nut, just depending on if you have the stock axles or if they've been replaced before. That nut can be different sizes. I usually just carry around a 30. That fits both a 29 and a 30 pretty well. So I guess we'll go ahead and start with these up here. Both are 17s. Those have little lock nuts or lock washers on them, so don't lose these. And then for your tie rod end, there's a cotter pin going through there. So pull the cotter pin out and then take that nut off. Now, this one's been recently replaced, but if you have one that's old and stuck on, you can take a hammer, and then right here on the actual knuckle itself, if you tap a few times here, that will start to move the tie rod end, and then you can pop it out after getting that stuck. There, you saw it move up a little bit. Now it comes right out. And with the bolts out, you can see your knuckle now moves pretty freely, so you'll be able to turn it this way pretty hard. And then you can even, if your axle's really stuck in there, you can take your hammer and just kind of tap the axle out. You should be able to pull it straight out the back, and then that'll give you room to pull it out of the transmission. Before you take it out of the trans, you'll want to drain the trans. When we pull it out, I'll show you guys where the drain plugs are. Basically right under the car, in the middle of the cross member, there's a big plug to drain the trans. So you'll want to drain it out first, because when you pull the axle out, any of the fluid still in it will come out from the axle holes. So now we'll go ahead and lift the car up a bit higher than this. Take the camera down there, and I'll show you guys how to unbolt the transmission mounts and how to take off the shift linkage and the stabilizer bar. If you guys watch the shift bushing video, you'll already know where those are and how to take them off. Now, coming under the car, this is looking from the driver's side, front. If we go in here, you can see right here on the front of the cross member, these are the 2 nuts for the front mount, both 14 mils. Going down the cross member, here on this access hole, you can see that's where the drain plug was for the trans. We've already removed that. And then, if I can scoot back here, up here, you can see the rear trans mount bolted to the trans. Then right here is a little access hole. Up in this access hole is the nut for that mount. Just one nut on a stud. Also a 14 like the front. So you come in at an angle with your socket here, you should be able to get to that nut and bolt. I'll see if I can see it real quick with the camera. And looking at this one, it appears that somebody has already reinstalled this one incorrectly. Looks like they completely missed the stud into the hole. But normally there'd be a stud here, and you just put your socket in at an angle like this to get that nut out. So that one's already gone. I will go ahead and pull these front 2 off. And then, again, looking towards the other side, on the transmission, you have your stabilizer bar and your shift linkage. So this will be a 12 mil with a nut on the back side, and then a 14 mil here. Make sure to go back and check out my video on how to replace and repair the shift linkage. I go through this whole system, how this all works, and how to replace these shift bushings. But for now, let's go ahead and pull these off, and then we can pull the engine out. There we go. Both of those are off. Trans bolts are out. While I'm down here, I'll go ahead and show you guys. Right here was the AC compressor. We had 2 bolts coming in from each side on the bottom that were already pulled out. So you just want a wrench to take these out on both sides. And then 2 more on the top. And I went ahead and zip tied the whole compressor just up to the front of the car around this big metal piece. So that way the compressor is forward and out of the way. We want to pull this up. You can see a lot of oil on that alternator. We're going to need to clean all that up. But you can see now all the hoses are disconnected. While I'm down here, I can show you right above the filter, right there, is the oil pressure sensor. So that's the wire we unplugged earlier that you couldn't see. All right, and then while we're down here, we're going to need to take off the 3 studs that hold down pipe on. So you can see them here, these 3 little triangles, and one on the back side here. Now, these are usually pretty rusted in place. I've broken these more times than I'd like to count. So ahead of time, it helps. These ones have been off recently, so I don't think they'll be too bad. But in general, make sure you get some PV Elaster or something similar. Just give those all a nice dousing. Oftentimes, a lot of heat's going to help as well. But these should be 14 mil. I like to take a 14 on a long extension. Just come down here with the impact and take those off. Hopefully, let them snapping. So we'll see what we can do. All right, now your down pipe should just pull straight down off of that. There we go. So you see right here on your cat, the pipe has some room to rotate. So I'll pull that down. Our gasket fell out. This one has a metal type gasket, so that's reusable. So we will be reusing that when we put it back together later. Real quick, I want to point out there's a little extra bracket there on top of the down pipe. Our engine didn't have that bolted on, so I forgot to mention it, but if your engine still has that bolted on, you'll need to unbolt that little extra bracket to get your down pipe off. Now I'll go back up top and take off the engine side mount. Alright, so that should be everything pulled off except for the engine side mount and ready to come out. I guess we'll know for sure when we start pulling it up. Whatever's left, it'll start dragging on. So when you're pulling up the hoist, since we're pulling it with the engine and trans together, obviously, there's going to be more weight on that side where the trans is, because the hooks are both on the engine. There's no hook for the trans. So I like to use a spreader bar on my hoist. If you use like a chain or a seatbelt or whatever to hook your engine, just make this side of the chain a little bit shorter. That way you're pulling up that weight, the heavy side first. So we'll go ahead and pull this forward and get it hooked on these hooks. So there. Left side. Lower. Lower. There you go. There. Look at your front. And we're going to lift up with just a little bit of pressure just to pull the weight off of the engine side mount here. There we go. So I saw the engine just shifted a little bit. So that means there should be almost no weight on this mount. And you'll see this mount has 3 17mm nuts holding it on to the engine block, which I've already cracked loose, so we don't have to show us struggling on video. And then up front is a 14mm long bolt holding it in. So note the weight pulled up with the engine hoist. Go ahead and pull that bolt out. Maybe pull up a little bit more. So you can see it kind of fell down here, so we'll crank it up a little bit more. Just pull the weight back off the bolt. A little more. Oh, there we go. Now with the weight off, it slides right out. Now go ahead and keep lifting it some. We'll see if that mount clears the body for a second. There we go. You can see the whole engine just shifted and started coming out. Keep going up a bit. A little more. Perfect. Now pause there. Now, since this car has AC, the AC line gets in the way of stuff, so I like to go ahead and just take the mount off the backside. So 17mm on an extension. Reach down in there. In this car, I can see that one of the nuts got stuck on the stud, so just pulling this whole stud out like a bolt. That's not a big deal. We'll put it back in later. Not a problem. Let's pull all 3 of those out. Now that can come out. So you'll see that this uses those big nuts, and then there's one big washer for each one. So we'll keep those together. Now the engine should be completely free to come out. So what I'm going to do is, as Jordan here lifts up the engine on his end, I'm going to stay on this side, make sure that our AC pulley, the tensioner pulley here, the alternator, and the crank all clear this frame rail. Make sure they don't get caught on this AC hose. And then I'll go to the other side and make sure that the transmission back piece does not get caught on any of this side framework piece. Just help guide it up. And then earlier, we took off the coolant hose. You'll see right here, the coolant pipe sitting right on the AC chunk, and this pipe sticks out a good bit. We don't want that hitting our AC dryer. We don't want it to hit the radiator. So I'm just going to help guide the engine up with my hands just to make sure it doesn't hit anything. So Jordan, go ahead and start going up, and I'll see if I can make sure that's all there. All right, up it goes. Alrighty, the dipstick was caught on the hose, so get that out of the way. There we go. All good. Well, see the front mount kind of touching the radiator, so we'll push that back. All right, go ahead. Pause. Here, the AC line again. Now that's clear. All right, keep going. Watch the rear mount. This thing's on the heater hose and your brake line there. Fuel hoses. Let's get those out of the way. Okay.
Well, is it okay that it's rolling on the condenser?
On the radiator? I'd rather it not.
She just wants fixed.
Alright, so the rear mount is touching a bit on our fuel line. I think I'll just go ahead and zip it off. Real quick, I'll show you guys. Right back in there, you can see the rear mount. It's kind of hitting the brake lines a bit. So there's on the other side just one bolt on the top and one bolt on the bottom. That's all that holds that bracket on. So now that the engine's up and out of the way, we'll go ahead and pop those two bolts off, take that mount off, to give us a little more room to work. But it's a lot easier to pull that mount off now that we have it a bit higher than it used to be. Out it comes.
Good.
Yeah, there it is.
Pull back.
And there we go. 1B3 freed from its oily home. Actually, doesn't look too bad. Pretty clean on the backside. Trans is looking pretty good. I will use this opportunity to go ahead and wash this out, pressure wash everything, and maybe prep for a new project. Maybe something bigger. Maybe something with some extra cams, maybe. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you next time. See ya! Man, I am just coating this poor camera in dirt. Man, what did you get in here for the thumbnail? You gotta be kidding me. Yeah, I needed that.
Oh.
You taking the big one?
There's no other one.
They're all on top.
Well, this one's charged.
They're all the ones on top are charged. Every single one.
Hell yeah.
Get the ratty
This
one.
one's got 3.
Get the ratty one. That's the one built for that tool.
This one?
The-
It looks like crap.
Yeah,
Looks
that's
like it's gonna shock you any minute.
yep. That's the one.
That's the one. I gotta go fix my floor.
What the hell is that?